First of all, welcome to the research circle. I hope you all are in good health because in this pandemic situation, we all are somehow in somewhere. So I hope you are in good health and taking care of yourselves and your near and dears. So our today's webinar topic is teaching and learning in the time of pandemic time, time of situation. Our speaker for this webinar is Marlo L. Rosa, General Department Porter, uh, Calocan Historical and Cultural Association faculty, Asia Pacific College faculty. I hope my screen is visible. First of all, welcome all to the research circle. I hope you are in health and you are taking care of yourself and your dear and near one. So today's free webinar topic is teaching and learning in this pandemic time. And today's expert speaker for this particular webinar is hello, am I audible? I am audible. Hello, am I audible? Okay, so I would like to request uh, Melron L. Siloza to start the session, please. Hello, am I audible now?
Yes, sir. It's audible now. Continue.
Hello, am I audible now? Hello, am I audible, sir? Hello, Hello everyone. I request all of you to please wait for 2 minutes. Our speaker is joining in the 2 minutes. He's having some technical issues. So I request all of you to kindly wait for 2 minutes, please. I request all of you to please stay with us. Speaker is joining in 2 minutes as he is having some technical issues in his Zoom meeting. So just 2 minutes. So welcome you all. I guess we are having a speaker with us. Hello, sir. Hello. Am I
Can
audible
you
to you?
hear me? Hi. Good
Yes.
morning
Hello.
once again.
Yeah,
Okay.
you're audible. You
So
can continue, sir.
okay. So good afternoon. Good afternoon, Philippines. Good afternoon. Good morning, India. Namaste. And I hope you are all safe. So I was tasked this morning to give a particular lecture and at the same time insights related to the topic teaching and learning in the time of pandemic. Next slide, please. So for the next slide, I would like to introduce myself. Wherein who am I to talk this topic? So I am a particular education graduate specializing on history and the social sciences. I started teaching in junior high school in the Philippines, wherein we are having secondary education, wherein divided into two, or in the junior and the senior high school. So I used to during my first year of teaching, I used to teach junior high school. Then later, I jumped into senior high school. Then now I'm teaching on college. So what does it mean for me? Teaching is wherein it is an important thing to discuss the notion that I am particularly experienced on teaching from the lower years to the higher years. Wherein what I'm going to talk about to you today is a general observation on what we have established on doing our education, and at the same time, what are the transitions happening during the time of pandemic. So for the objectives of this session, I would like to, next slide please, I would like to talk about the following. This is our general objectives for this afternoon on this session. So the first one will be describe the current situation of teaching and learning in the time of pandemic using scientific observations and articles. As much as possible, I want to describe the teaching and learning in relation to the scientific community. How do they map? How do they study? And at the same time, what are the products of our analysis on the current situation of our educational system? Especially, I'm talking about for the Philippine context. Hope I can relate it also with India as well as the educational experience in Asia. Another thing is analyze the general situation of teaching and learning in the context of pandemic. So on this one, I would like to analyze what is the situation of teaching and learning given that we are on the pandemic. As we all know, our dear viewers, teaching and learning before the pandemic is very challenging. There's a lot of philosophies, there's a lot of praxis, there's a lot of pedagogy. But especially during the time when we are experiencing pandemic, it is more challenging. And there's a lot of innovative ways and at the same time flaws that we need to analyze so that we can improve the situation that we are experiencing right now. Last but not the least, we are going to have uh, address the mentioned insights using particularly or maybe generating some new ways on addressing those gaps so that we can have a particular takeaways uh, for this afternoon or morning in India. Next slide, please. Teaching, learning. We're in pandemic teaching, learning. I would like to start my session today by means of giving you three words which are very important key ideas on what we are going to talk about this afternoon. So as we all know, teaching is an experience or passing of experience or our permanent change on behavior of our learners. We're in. There's a lot of changes right now, especially during the pandemic, on how we deliver this kind of experiences so that our students will learn from it. Another thing is the word teaching. I know on our viewers today, this is a research circle. That's why I expect that our viewers today are also educators on their respective fields. That's why I know we have common in understanding the word teaching nowadays. We are very challenged on how to implement our strategies. So maybe on this afternoon, I can give you some insights or things, maybe basic things or general things that you can consider to come up how to deliver our teaching or our pedagogy on our best and at the same time on the context of our learner. And last but not the least, pandemic. As you all know, pandemic is a stressful time both on teachers and students because they have some social, psychological, and cultural implications that we need to consider on designing, implementing, and at the same time assessing the outcomes of what we are going to teach them. Next slide, please. Flexible learning. Wherein, I don't know in India, if ever you are very familiar with flexible learning, wherein in the Philippines, wherein flexible learning was only introduced or repopularized by the time of pandemic, wherein in the Philippine setting, the two words are very familiar to the students, wherein the synchronous and asynchronous. Synchronous, wherein with the use of the internet, the teacher and the students are conducting their classes instead of the traditional face-to-face. While asynchronous, wherein there's no actual interaction with the teachers, but maybe it can be the module, it can be the course design, it can be the learning packets were implemented so that the students can cater learning. And another term that I would like to emphasize on this session, in the Philippine setting, it is very capitalistic to say that it's very popular. This four icons that I included on my slide, the Microsoft Teams, the Google Meet, the Zoom, and the Canva, are the most popular platform on conducting the synchronous and asynchronous activities, especially on the private educational institutions. And flexible learning also challenges the notion of traditional schooling. And at the same time, it transforms into digital ways. When we're talking about digital ways, I would like to indicate that our students in the Philippines from a long history or period of time used to have a learning by means of face-to-face or teacher or going to school, learning from their teachers. But now, with the help of the technology and the digital apparatus and equipment, that learning sessions or maybe the learning took place na. Okay, so next slide, please. Thank you.
So what are the general observation on the learning in the time of pandemic in the Philippine experience? Hopefully, I can relate it with India because as you all know, we are all generally experiencing and at the same time observing uh, this kind of experiences. The first one will be the cultural expectations. The first one is Filipinos use, as I mentioned a while ago, face-to-face is very popular in the Philippines before the pandemic, wherein since the educational institutions was established by the Spanish in the Philippines, the Filipinos tend to be teach in schools. So therefore, one of the cultural expectations of the learning experience is the learning took place on schools. That's why one of the challenges to our learners and our teachers is to have the mindset that there is a transition. Later, I will discuss that. Next is the teacher and student relationship. On our end, wherein in the Philippines, it's very important because our curriculum is student centered. As much as possible, we are empowering students. So therefore, the teacher-student relationship is very important. How? We're in feedbacks and at the same time, consultations are very important on schools and peer mentoring. But today, as you all know, on the online setup, there is also teacher relationship established, but it is through virtual, wherein there's a divide on the physical attachment to the students. Wherein, when I'm saying physical attachments, as you all know, emotions are very important in education. And when we are giving feedbacks on the students, they can feel if ever you are serious. They can feel if ever you are sincere on what you are saying to them, which it can be helpful for them. It can inspire them, or maybe it can make them improve on their situation. And another thing is school in the Philippines as a cultural expectation in our country, it's a form of social learning wherein when we're going to school, it is not only the teacher and the lessons that we are learning, but also the bonding with the classmates and at the same time the school administrators and at the same time the officials, wherein there is an intricacy of the relationship that we are trying to establish on that, which is nowadays it's different. So let's go to the transition because on the transition, there's a lot of options actually in the Philippines. Some of the schools used to have modules wherein you're going to answer modules, are just going to complete it, submit it weekly. Your parents are going to school to submit your modules, or maybe if you are well off, you can have the digital modules wherein you're going to submit it online. And some of the students are trying, especially on the private sectors, are having the modes of synchronous and asynchronous or the flexible learning, wherein they are utilizing platforms so that they can submit their requirements. The teacher will see them twice or once a week so that they can be guided by these teachers on what they shall do on the modules that are assigned to them. Then another thing is the implementation. The biggest challenge that I would like to give is there's a big divide on education right now because the public used to tend utilize the traditional one, where in the private one, as they are capable with it, they're investing now on the said platforms, wherein it showcases that the opportunity on having the modes depends also with the capacity or the social structure that you belong in the Philippines. Another thing is the digital divide. On some public schools, they are also utilizing the synchronous, wherein they are utilizing softwares. But the problem there is the digital divide. Many of our students in the Philippines doesn't have an equipment that will satisfy the requirements uh, of the technologies that we are implementing. For example, Zoom. What I am experiencing right now, I'm using i7, but still the Zoom is not working well. That's why I used to open it on the browser because in the Philippines, we're in as a third world country, we are experiencing a lot of technological offerings wherein there's a lot of gadgets, but some of them are not accurate, or maybe some of them are not fit to the updates that implemented on those platforms. That's why there's a problem, the digital divide. Some do not have the devices, some wants to have the device but they are not able to have it, wherein for them the preference is to use the tablet so that they can have the synchronous. But the problem here in the Philippines is the internet connection, wherein there's a lag, there is a particular disconnectivity that they are experiencing. That's why digital divide is very evident on this kind of transition of learning in the Philippines, wherein the students sometimes, just like what we have discussed, this morning in India and afternoon in the Philippines, before I joined, I experienced a lag. It's because of the internet. It said on my screen that I have a poor connection, wherein we cannot something to do about this on our end as a teacher and a student. But yun nga, on our session for this afternoon, I would like to express some ways on how to maximize this kind of gaps, because I believe on the concept of structure and agency, wherein the pandemic is the structure and we have a lot of agencies to do so that we can improve learning. Then in the Philippines, another transition is the output than input. Philippines, where in nowadays it's more of the achievement is based from output itself, not on input anymore. Wherein how many things have you complied, how many things have you submitted to your teacher or professor, wherein it means you comply with the class. So one of the problems right now, wherein there's no such thing as authentic assessment, there's no such thing as feedbacks, there's no such thing as formative assessments anymore, but it is more of just complete the module, and it means you are expected to understand the basic concepts that you need to know on that particular level that you belong. Then another thing, which is I would like to emphasize this afternoon and morning in India again, environmental adjustments. So the homeschooling is not very popular thing in the Philippines. As I said on the cultural expectations, Filipinos are very familiar with the face-to-face learning. But for this one, the environmental adjustments transcends all the different factors. To mention, on my end, my students are very problematic on how to divide their responsibilities at home and in school, wherein they are having their class, their parents are going to ask them to help them on the chores. So that's why their attention is not, their focus is not yet implemented on the class itself, because they are thinking of the other things that they need to do. And at the same time, another common concern here is the noise, because in the Philippines we are very rigid in terms of the social structure. That's why once your neighbor is creating some noise, or maybe there are some animals who are producing sounds, it can be registered on the online class, wherein it can be a cause or a great cause of a disturbances or maybe a distraction for the students and the teachers. So next slide, please. Thank you very much. So for the next thing that I would like to brought up is the scientific studies on the Philippines in relation to the situation of learning. So I used to draw it from the study of medical educators, Baticolon, and his group. It is entitled Barriers to Online Learning in the Time of COVID-19, a national survey of medical students in the Philippines. It was held or published in February 2021. It's very recent. So on this study, they conducted it with the medical students or medical students in the Philippines, and they tried to map out the situation of those students in terms of their experiences on learning online. So as you can see on the data, wherein difficulty on adjusting learning style is the most or almost problematic thing that the students on the medical field in the Philippines experience when it comes to pandemic implementation of online learning, wherein they are having hard time of adjusting their learning style, because in online learning, some of the faculties or educators are trying to be uniform on implementing things, especially deadlines, instructions. So later we're going to address that. Another thing is need to fulfill responsibilities at home. As I mentioned, the environmental is a very big factor on learning. As we all know, educators, that environment is a big factor on conducive learning. That's why in the Philippines, some of the students are trying to pinpoint that it's a very big factor for them that they are not learning so much because of the responsibilities that they are distracted in relation to their household chores, in their roles in the family. Another thing is poor communication with educators, limited space conducive for learning. The space itself is also mentioned by the students. Unreliable or no internet access, wherein another thing. Mental health issue also mentioned on these factors. Then next is lack of technical skills. Then the least priority among the situations that I am trying to mention using this study is lack of basic needs, no device or limited access, need to work for extra income. As you all know, lack of basic needs because these medical students, we assume in the Philippines that they have capable on providing the equipment that they need on having the online learning. That's why it is the most least priorities of this group of students on this survey or this study. So in general, wherein this is medical students, it doesn't embody, but generally speaking, it embodies the learning experience of all levels in the Philippines. Wherein difficulties of learning styles based on my initial studies on junior high school, senior high school, and college on the different fields are having difficulties on adjusting learning styles. Why? Because, as I mentioned, we are very uniform on implementing instructions to the students, wherein it is more of the practical thing that I need to prepare one lesson for this day. But on the online learning itself, our students much more needed or they are more demanding in terms of the learning styles, or maybe we need to address their learning styles, especially on this setup. Later, maybe the tips will help us to unlock this kind of to unlock the solution to this issue of adjusting the learning style of our students, because virtual learning is very, very difficult because it's hard to connect even though you are connected by the internet, but the interpersonal connection was not yet established very much. Especially you, I am very interesting on studying the first year students, because the first year students nowadays are doesn't meet personally their teachers or their professors. That's why I would like to have a study also on how do they take the relationship with their professors, or are they nice, are they good, or maybe what are the parameters that they are trying to implement on understanding the characteristics of their educators. Next slide, please. Thank you very much. For the basic education, the previous I mentioned is all about the medical students or representing the tertiary. For the elementary, wherein as you can see that the data according to our Department of Education lowered by the year 2020-2021, wherein it's almost half, or maybe it's almost half of the previous school years, that the drop of enrollees, both combined public, private, and state universities and local colleges in the Philippines lowered in almost half, because some of the students accepted in themselves that they cannot cater this kind of learning format, or maybe they cannot they are not able to come up with this kind of learning setup, which is they tend to stop, they tend to drop, they tend to wait if ever the face-to-face classes will resume in our country. Next slide, please. So we unlock the realities, the situation. I already described to you the situation on our country of teaching and learning in the time of pandemic. And at the same time, we have some analysis or insights of those data. Some of the data showcasing some representations of the Philippine education sector. Now, I would like to give you the 10 insights on teaching and learning in the time of pandemic. This is coming from scientific, personal experience, or grounded theory, and at the same time, some practical tips that we need to be reminded on doing teaching and learning in the online setup. Next slide, please. So the first thing that I would like to give you this morning and afternoon, choose only the essentials than covering your syllabus. Majority of the educators, or maybe majority of the educators and teachers nowadays are very concerned, or maybe very conscious about do I cover all the topics on the lesson prescribed on my syllabus. But on our end, as a practical thing, we need to be essential in the time of pandemic, because as you all know, our learners are disturbed. That's why we need to choose the essential for them. When we're talking about essential, you need to understand first the situation of your students, then later decide what are the topics that they need to learn in relation to your field, so that you can answer the two questions I mentioned below, why they need to learn this. So this is the parameter on choosing the topic itself. How can it affect their lives at the current times? When we're talking about essentialism, it is not only a philosophical educational foundation, but it is also important for us to implement right now that we are experiencing pandemic. Why? Because our students cannot cater what we are going to say to them. That's why we need to be straight to the point, give them the essentials that they can utilize for the current situation that they are experiencing. Don't focus on the content, focus on the quality that you are going to give them, because it's very important in the time of pandemic. They will forget the objective names, they forgot dates, but they are not going to forget the skills, or maybe they're not going to forget the critical output of what you're going to do in class. Next slide, please. Second, one of the most common teaching and learning problems in the time of pandemic is keep on migrating traditional pedagogies on online setup. Again, I use the word avoid. I use when I'm preparing this slide, I usually being conscious on the words itself, because I want to use the word don't, but instead I use the word avoid, because not all times, maybe some pedagogies can be migrated on online learning. But I will cite an example for you related on this takeaway or insight. Avoid migrating traditional pedagogies on online setup simply pertains to that: do not transport all of your strategies on the face-to-face classes into online one, because some of them are not fit to the physical setup. There might be a connectivity, interpersonal consequence to both educator and learner. Wherein, for example, on our end in the Philippines, I used to migrate all of the traditional strategies on my classes. Wherein I would like to use a PowerPoint, I would like to post the activity here and try to do it online using breakout sessions. But it doesn't work. Why? Because the students are complaining. Sir, we do not have a lot of data. We are a limited connectivity wherein I'm using loads. That's why you need to be cautious, especially when you're going to give them movie reviews, and at the same time documentaries, and at the same time groupings that they are going to create something. Uh, Therefore, there are some pedagogies on the traditional setup which are not effective on doing online, because this kind of pedagogies will affect also the interpersonal consequence. Maybe the students will blame you that they are not learning because you're just giving them tasks that they do not understand, and they are having difficulties on delivering it. So therefore, it is a both consequence for the educator and the learner. The learner is complaining they are having difficulties on doing the traditional pedagogy on an online setup, and at the same time, you as a teacher, you are not going to get what you expect from what you have planned on your lessons. Wherein you expect that they're going to learn it, but again, it's different on the online setup. So you need to think about it. Next slide, please. Another thing is focus on formative assessment than summative. One of the things that I observe using surveys to the educators in the Philippines during the pandemic, I used to have my own researches for them. I would like to do surveys with them and focus group discussion. One of the common mistakes that we are implementing is we focus on the summatives. We are giving objective tests, true or false identification. Stop that during the online setup, because you must be learner centered even you are online. So therefore, you need to design a particular learning activities or assessments and evaluation for them that will cater more of the formative one, wherein the skill, the insights, wherein the higher order skills must be measured, not the lots or the lower thinking skills. Because as I mentioned, essentials are those who are going to be beneficial for the students, not only in terms of having their knowledge, but by means of empowering them by giving them the skill. So that's why you need to be implementing formative assessments on classes, because feedbacks are very important. Social support is very important to our students, that they can hear that they are very good, they are working well, so they are lacking of this one. So they are going to be conscious that they need to exert extra effort, or maybe they are going to expand their skill that they already know that. So therefore, they are going to transfer to another higher level. So that's why you need to have the feedbacks at all times on your classes. Don't hesitate to tell that they are wrong, but the most important thing there is explain which part they are wrong, because it is part of the formative assessment that we are talking about than summative. It's not the numbers will cater the true learning of the students, but rather the reason why they got the score, and at the same time, the reason why they fail or why they succeed on your class. Next slide, please. Another thing is consider both, please, the mental health and physical health of our learners. If you are lucky, or maybe if you are what do you call this, privileged enough to do it, kindly limit your time on giving synchronous sessions with them. Because as you all know, there's a scientific study I put there using infographic. There is a burden of staring at a smartphone. And another thing is there is also prescribed by pediatricians of United States for the screen time for the students or for the kids that we are handling. That's why we need to be careful. It's not about the time that you give them 3 hours lecture means they got all the necessary informations they have. But it is how you maximize the time or the allotment or the budget of the time or the activities or maybe the learning plan will be the most important thing at the end of the day. Wherein, for example, let them talk, let them speak, let them express, and sum up. That's a good thing. Wherein we are not talking about 3 hours, 4 hours, 5 hours, or maybe the duration of how you give your lesson, but rather the shortest and meaningful is the best thing that we need to be considered on implementing on our classes in the time of pandemic and on an online setup. Okay, next slide, please. Thank you very much. Then another thing is maximize the features of your platform for participation. So we have all the platforms. We are all familiar with the platforms, even in Zoom here. Wherein kindly maximize that. If you want to say something, if you are going to ask questions and the students are not able to open their cameras, their microphones, use chat box or maybe emoticons will do. So it's part of the strategy or the pedagogical preparations of the educator on the lesson. So polls, wherein try to create a catchy things or maybe what movie is the best for you? Maybe a simple question, but it matters a lot for the students. Polls, chats, wherein when we're talking about chats, just pose a question there, a tricky question or maybe a critical question, and let them answer it. Do not focus on the score that they participate and you're going to give them points, but let them speak because it is an opportunity for them to express themselves so that you are also empowered to understand what are the needs or what are the levels of your students. Another thing is threads, and when we're talking about threads, read the threads of the students and try to relate it on your lesson because it's very important to know your students if they are still there, because here in the Philippines, one of the common memes in the Philippines, popular memes is the students are turning off their cameras, then they are joining the meeting. But at the end of the day, they're just playing games. That's a sad reality. It's not the problem of the students, but maybe the faculty because they got boring. So that's why you need to create or innovate yourself to check out if ever they are still attentive to your classes. So one means of there is from 1 hour, you need to post 3 questions so that you can monitor if he is still there, or maybe you are going to create a challenge for them, a trick question, a icebreaker for them. It's important and randomly select them. But one of the intricacies of this one, of the random selection, is the students nowadays is very anxious when you are going to have online recitations. One of the feedbacks of the students is, "Sir, I got nervous when you are calling me. I cannot concentrate." So that's why uh, you need to be more lenient and at the same time strategic and innovative on extracting answers to your students. Next slide, please. Consider and practice routines, etiquettes, and privacy. One of the takeaways. Don't force the students to open their camera. So if they do not want to open their camera, let them. Let them turn off their camera. But you need also to establish courtesy. So it is more of the classroom management. So try to establish during the first day or maybe for those who are running their classes, use the buttons of raising hands, maybe greetings, and at the same time maintain privacy. Always explain the purpose why you are getting or trying to extract something from them. For example, you are asking questions for them. try to explain also why you are asking it to them. Because if you want the student showcase routines, etiquettes, and privacy and respect, you need to practice it even we are on online. Because it is the next future of our world. We are now doing our business online. So that's why etiquettes must transcend also on the online setup. So as of now, we need to be conscious about it. So if you're going to unlock your mic or you're going to open your mic, kindly ask permission by commenting on our chat box that you want to say something, or maybe raise your hands if you want to say something. It's very important because it empowers the students to understand the word etiquette. Next slide, please. Process everything. One of the takeaways for this morning and afternoon session, process everything. Don't let the word or presentation speak, contextualize it. One of the major errors of the educators is they are trying to create directions or maybe instructions and let the word speak for them. But take note, words are very powerful. It can build and destroy relations. Once you are posting words or maybe instructions to the students, it is not a matter of they have low comprehension. But on an online setup, as a cultural anthropologist, you need to be conscious about the words for them. For example, one of the instances the students is very, I'm very traumatic about this one. I used to create a particular group chat with my students wherein they can express themselves, current events, memes that related to our subject. Then one of my students posted there a particular meme, which is I think it's not foul, but it is something sensitive about politics. Then the student was asking because I'm not the kind of person who likes to react on comments at first during the first time implementing online classes. So the student is asking, "Sir, are you mad at me?" Why? Sir, because you just seen my statement, and at the same time you replied okay. So the word okay, which I means it's okay lang, or maybe it's okay to post that on that our venue, stands a lot of meaning for the students. Okay, it can be a hyper reaction to the post that it is wrong. So the students now is very panicking, or maybe she is very anxious about the reaction on what she's going to post, which later can result to the damage of relation of the students. Maybe they're not going to participate anymore to your class, or maybe on the positive way, maybe they're going to be conscious and put a context on what they are posting on the group chat. So you need to be also processing everything. So I process it. When we're talking about process, tell why you say okay. For me, okay means it's okay to post it on that venue because everyone is very critical on what you have posted to them, or maybe they understand the context of what do you want to say to them. So next slide, please. So another thing is maximize consultation. Consultation session is a time wherein it is outside of your official class hours, wherein let the students feel another atmosphere wherein you are a peer, you are a parent, you are a brother or sister, or maybe you are a mentor, wherein the students can tell what's on their mind in relation not only to your subject, but rather on their personal development, on their spiritual development, and at the same time, the social relationships and maybe the social experiences they are experiencing. Maybe some of them are experiencing mental health issues and they cannot speak it on your lecture or maybe on your discussion sessions. That's why consultation session is very important during the time of learning in the time of pandemic, because consultation makes you understand how do the students feel, especially when they are taking online classes, which is another good thing for the educators to address the problems of those students by referring them to the authorities. Maybe they need some your guidance counselor on the school, psychologists, mentors, etc. Or maybe you need to talk to their parents so that they can address that issue. So that's the most important thing on consultation, because although our students is residing on their home, doing their tasks on their home, they're not speaking to their parents. That's the reality. Maybe they are very secretive about it, but the consultation is a particular means of extracting some of the concerns of the students and maybe you are a tool on addressing or bridging the gaps that they are experiencing. Next slide, please. I think there's last two slides for this afternoon. So let them use the language they are comfortable with. But disclaimer, if ever foreign language, uh, let them use the foreign language. But for the subjects that they can speak on their native tongue and everyone can understand it, let them use it. Because on the time of pandemic, some of the students are frightened to speak in English because maybe it is an online setup and maybe they're going to be bashed or maybe they're going to be the center of attraction. If ever in the Philippines, one of the worst culture in education system is once you mispronounce something, you're going to be the center of attention of the class or maybe the conversations wherein maybe mispronounce that thing wherein that's the problem. So that's why if ever the students wants to express or to engage them on this setup, let them use the language itself. But also, do not train them to do code switching. If ever they want to speak in English, let them speak consistently in English. And at the same time, if they want to use your language or maybe your native tongue, let them use it on the consistent manner so that they can practice also the communication skills that we are expecting for them. Next slide, please. I think this is the last slide that I would like to share with you as an insight for the teaching and learning in the time of pandemic. As much as possible, draw examples from the experiences and always be patient listening to them. One of the problems that I observed empirically on teaching and learning in the Philippines is once the student is starting maximizing the group chats, the teacher are just going to see it and they're just going to read it, read. But it's not the matter or it's not the thing that you need to do. As an educator, you need to process those conversations and create a solution in relation to your topic because it is not only a manifestation that the students is commenting they're active, but how do they defend what they feel, what they think about the topic. So try to challenge them by means of drawing examples, by trying to extract or being patient on what are their points on what they are posting on the messages that they are trying to extract with or share with their classmates because patience is very important on teaching and learning on the online setup. So maybe some of the students are very annoying because they cannot give you an answer straight to the point. But be patient and draw experiences and examples from your lesson to extract what do they want to say to the class. Because socially relevant and timely relevant class is a personalized one. If they can relate, they are going to learn from it. If they can relate, they are going to get bored on it and they are going to pursue subject. So that's why in the online setup, as a final word for this session, the challenge for us is to be not to be techie or maybe not to be expert on 100% on having the platforms or maybe how to use the chosen platforms of your institution, but it's how are you going to balance the understanding of that technology and how you are going to personalize them with your students. For me, that's the most important thing that we can resolve the issues that I mentioned before on this session on addressing teaching and learning in the time of pandemic. So thank you very much for listening. If you have some questions, my email is there on the last slide. My Facebook is Don Silvosa. Especially, I want to talk to teachers, educators, especially because I'm interested with education and cultures. So that's why we can talk about it so that we can collaborate on the parallelism or maybe the comparative study about Indian education system in the time of pandemic and in the Philippines. So thank you very much for listening. I'm grateful for this opportunity to share with you my insights and at the same time my product of observations and studies in cultural anthropology. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for this nice and informative session. I would like to thank for this for taking out the time and sharing your views on today's current situation of teaching and learning. So I guess that's it for today's session. So before we end, I would like to thank all the participants who have joined us through Research Circle app, YouTube Live, and Facebook Live. And I would like to add one thing here, that we do have running a series of free webinars on a Research Circle YouTube channel. And this today's webinar also will be available on our Research Circle YouTube channel. If you want to watch it again, or if you like to share to your colleagues or friends, you can do that. So at last, thank you so much. And as we are promoting this message continuously, be safe, take care of your near and dear, and try to be in your house and enjoy the uh, loneliness and spread the knowledge. So thank you so much.